from Kuwait and went into Iraq and ended the ground war in just 4 days and had some choice words for the former Iraqi leader.
As far as Saddam Hussein being a great military strategist, he is neither a strategist, nor is he schooled in the operational art, nor is he a tactician, nor is he a general, nor is he as a soldier. Other than that, he's a great military man. I want you to know that.
In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. What followed was one of the largest military deployments since Vietnam. Operation Desert Shield sent over 500,000 American troops into the Persian Gulf to defend Saudi Arabia, followed by Operation Desert Storm, a massive air and ground assault that drove Saddam Hussein's forces out in just 100 hours. The war was fast, decisive, and celebrated as a clean victory. But for thousands of American service members, the real war began after they came home. Many developed strange, debilitating symptoms: chronic fatigue, memory loss, joint pain, respiratory problems, and rashes that wouldn't heal. Doctors didn't have a name for it yet, but the soldiers did. They called it Gulf War Syndrome. For decades, the Department of Defense insisted it was all in their heads due to stress, depression, or anxiety. But it wasn't. The same government that sent them to war may have poisoned them with experimental pills, untested vaccines, chemical plumes, and oil-fire toxins. They were told to serve with honor, to trust their leaders, and to never question their orders. But when their bodies began to fail, those same leaders turned their backs. So why did the military deny the truth for so long? And what exactly were troops exposed to in the desert? And how many have already died since the government finally admitted the truth? Let's try and find out.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, a Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History.
They called it the perfect war. Few American deaths, clear objectives, and a victory that seemed to wash away the ghost of Vietnam. But perfection came at a price no one could see. Within months of returning home, thousands of Desert Storm veterans began getting sick. Some collapsed on morning runs. Others developed migraines so intense they couldn't stand sunlight. Families watched strong young men and women deteriorate into confusion and exhaustion.
If you want to get real technical, I saw a big fireball or flash up towards the portage ball, and then the echo of the explosion. Then we went to the bunker.
And while we was outside, we felt this mist type stuff, like, you know, like a rain.
My hands and my face were stinging and burning. My lips started feeling funny, like they were numb. That's when the sirens started going off.
By 1994, more than a quarter of all Gulf War troops reported the same unexplained symptoms: muscle pain, memory loss, insomnia, infertility, and rashes that burned through the skin. Yet the Pentagon brushed it off as stress, a reaction to combat, or even malingering. Doctors who pushed for answers were silenced or reassigned. When independent researchers found chemical traces in blood samples, the results were classified. The official story became simple: nothing happened in the desert, and anyone who said otherwise was imagining things. Meanwhile, the illness spread across units that had never seen combat: supply clerks, mechanics, and medics, all sick. Many of them had one thing in common: they'd been ordered to take experimental pills, breathed in the smoke of burning oil fields, and operated downwind of chemical depots that U.S. bombs had destroyed. They had fought for their country. Now they are fighting a second one against their own government just to be believed. What the troops didn't know was that the air they were breathing could kill them. In early 1991, American and British airstrikes hit more than 30 suspected Iraqi chemical and biological weapon sites. One of them, an ammunition depot near Khamisiyah, stored thousands of rockets filled with nerve agents like sarin and cyclosarin. When those rockets detonated, a toxic cloud drifted south across the desert. For years, the Pentagon insisted there had been no exposure, no chemicals, no danger. But satellite data, classified at the time, later showed that the cloud spread hundreds of miles directly across U.S. troop positions. Even worse, sensors in the field had gone off, recording spikes consistent with nerve agent release. Those readings disappeared from the record. At the same time, soldiers were issued small white tablets called pyrosigamine bromine, and experimental nerve agent antidote pills that had never been approved for use in combat. They were told to take them every 8 hours without being told the side effects: muscle twitching, chest tightness, blurred vision, nausea, and anxiety. Then came the vaccines, anthrax, botulism, and others, sometimes given in rushed, undocumented series. Many troops reported immediate sickness after receiving them, but the reactions were buried in paperwork or written off as coincidence. All this while the desert burned. More than 600 Kuwaiti oil wells had been set on fire, releasing black smoke, thick with benzene, sulfur, and heavy metals. Troops lived and slept under it for weeks. Everywhere they turned, something was poisoning them: the air, the pills, the injections, and the lies. And when the symptoms appeared, the military story didn't change. The war was clean. The victory was total. The soldiers were fine. But the data didn't lie. Neither did the funerals. When the symptoms spread across the veteran community, the government had a choice: investigate or deflect. It chose deflection. Pentagon officials launched studies that excluded most of the sick troops. When independent doctors offered to share data, the Department of Defense claimed no evidence of chemical exposure existed. Every report that contradicted the official line was quietly buried under new committees and jargon. In 1996, a Defense Department memo surfaced. It warned that acknowledging exposure could open the floodgates of liability. The priority wasn't protecting veterans, it was protecting the budget. The Department of Veteran Affairs followed suit. Claims were denied for lack of proof, despite medical files showing identical symptoms across entire units. Veterans were sent to psychiatric counseling instead of toxicology exams. When investigators finally proved that sarin and cyclosarin nerve agents had been released in Khamisiyah, the Pentagon admitted exposure, but to only 20,000 troops, then 60,000, then 100,000. Eventually, the number climbed past 300,000, and the story shifted again. Yes, the exposure happened, officials said, but the doses were too low to cause harm. By that point, hundreds of soldiers had died, and thousands more were disabled. Marriages fell apart. Families went bankrupt, waiting for benefits that never came. The government that had sent them to war now demanded they fight another one, against bureaucracy, denial, and time itself. It would take 3 decades, dozens of congressional hearings, and relentless pressure from veterans groups before the VA finally recognized Gulf War illness as a presumptive condition. But even now, many are still waiting for acknowledgement, treatment, or justice. The enemy wasn't in Iraq. It was the silence back home. The Gulf War lasted 6 weeks. The cover-up lasted 30 years. When the medals were pinned and the cameras left, the Department of Defense quickly reclassified the data that could have proven what happened. chemical plume models, medical logs, even satellite readings from coalition partners, all locked away under national security. Veterans who filed for information under the Freedom of Information Act received redacted pages, blank charts, or letters claiming the files had been lost. Meanwhile, the toll kept rising. Service members in their 40s began dying of rare brain cancers and autoimmune disorders. Others lived in the haze of pain and fatigue that no doctor could name. Children born to Gulf War vets showed higher rates of congenital defects, but every time a pattern appeared, their research funding disappeared. Inside the VA, claims processors were told to look for alternative explanations: depression, age, weight, anything but the war. The same government that taught them to never leave a man behind had left an entire generation behind and lied about it. For the veterans who refused to give up, the fight turned into a lifetime mission. They built their own databases, compared lab results, and forced Congress to hold a hearing. Each time, the Pentagon offered the same apology without accountability. Mistakes were made. Today, more than 1/3 of Gulf War veterans are classified as disabled. Many of them aren't old enough to retire, yet they walk with canes, breathe through oxygen tubes, and take handfuls of pills just to sleep through the night. Their war ended in 1991, but their bodies never came home. The truth is simple, and that's why it was buried. They weren't wounded by the enemy, they were poisoned by their own chain of command. So ask yourself, how many more generations of soldiers will have to fight their own government for recognition? How many times can we call it an accident before it becomes policy? And if the men and women who answered the call are left to rot in silence afterward, why would anyone still be willing to fight for a country that refuses to fight for them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments or show ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.